Great. Hi everyone, and thanks for letting me present remotely here. So I'll present on surrogate goals and safe Pareto improvements. Just quickly, can you see like the whole screen? Is there some issue if I move around because I have small zoom windows in front of stuff, but I guess you can see the whole slide and everything, right? Yeah. Good. Okay. Just making sure. My name is Caspar Oesterheld, and the work I'm presenting is kind of joint work with some people like the papers with Vince Konitzer. I've also worked on this stuff with some others, and I want to in particular highlight Nathaniel and Anthony because they're actually in London. So if later over dinner or the like you want to discuss this with these kind of topics, I think they'd be great to talk to. I think Anthony will give the talk right after this one on some similar ideas. Maybe Nathaniel, maybe I guess maybe you. I mean, it's a small group. Probably you all know each other's names at this point, but maybe Nathaniel, you can raise your hand or something. Okay. So here's the plan. I think we have an hour in the schedule, and I have slides for 20 to 30 minutes. The idea is for you to ask questions during the presentations if you have any. And then we can use the remaining time for discussion and kind of brainstorming. So the presentation will mostly not be talking about any kind of cryptography ideas, even though, I'm actually currently with Nathaniel working on a project that does use kind of cryptography to implement some of these ideas. But I'll mostly keep it out of the presentation part, and then maybe you can discuss it during the brainstorming. Okay. So the general motivation for this work is that sometimes in the real world there's some kind of bargaining going on, and people make conflicting demands for some good, like, I don't know, countries making conflicting demands about pieces of land or something. And then if the demands are inconsistent, then normally what happens is some kind of conflict, or at least that's one of the things that can happen, is like some kind of conflict in which utility is basically burned. So players kind of actively pay to hurt the other side. You can think of war as being like this. At least some kind of wars, I guess. Okay. So here's an example of a normal form game where something like this could happen. So for now, ignore these kind of eliminated parts of the game. So those are actions that can be eliminated by strict dominance. So we would not expect them to be played. Just ignore them for now. They'll become relevant later. So we basically have this 2x2 game in the top, and it's kind of like a game of chicken. The two players can make demands, which is like this DM, which is kind of like I demand this item or something like that. And the problem is if both demand the item, then there's conflict. So the story in the paper is that it is exactly this kind of territory that two countries both kind of demand to annex. Okay. And there are multiple Nash equilibria, and so there's this Nash equilibrium selection problem. Similar to a game of chicken, and we might imagine that in the real world, sometimes they won't be able to kind of you might say coordinate on the same natural equilibrium, or they might kind of disagree on what the appropriate natural equilibrium is. One of them might think that they might both think that they kind of rightfully that the thing that they're bargaining over kind of should belong to them, and so sometimes it might happen that they both play DM, and that conflict occurs. Okay. Now let's imagine that this game is not played kind of directly by the players, but it's played via delegation. So the let's say like both kind of original players or principals are humans, and they kind of each recruit a robot, or kind of more generally some kind of representative to play the game on their behalf. And yeah, we might imagine that one way they can do this is like to write some algorithm, or like if it's just a simple game like this, they could just explicitly specify what they want to happen, what they want their representative to play in the game. So they could just explicitly say, okay, play DM or play RM. Okay, if they do that, then of course it doesn't really change that much about the game. But now the first we're going to make kind of two kind of additional assumptions. The first is that they can make some kind of joint credible commitments in how they instruct their representatives. So one version of this is this kind of program equilibrium idea, but you can also imagine that it's kind of more like mediators, or there's like some joint contract that they both sign, which says they're going to tell their representatives certain things. Okay. So this alone still doesn't really solve this game, because there's still many equilibria. They might still disagree about what should happen in the game. They might still like each of them might still say, okay, well, I want the DMRN outcome, and then this bilateral, like both being able to make these credible commitments doesn't really help. Okay, but now an extra assumption that we're going to make is that the representatives are actually they have some intrinsic intelligence or abilities. And in particular, they're able to play games really well. So instead of telling them what action to take or giving them some algorithms, we assume that the humans can just tell them to play the game in whatever way they think is reasonable. And in fact, we are going to assume that they're kind of so good, or like the humans trust them so much to do this well, that kind of by default, if they aren't able to make, if they weren't able to make credible commitments, or if they weren't able to, if they're kind of unable to agree on some joint bilateral commitment, then the default is for them to just do that, to just say, okay, just play the game as like with these utilities and as best as you can. Okay. Even so, like the equilibrium selection problem remains. If they do this aligned delegation, if they tell the robots, here's my utility function, do your best, the robots might still end up in the DM outcome. Okay. Now comes the idea for how to decrease or like basically eliminate the loss of potentially playing this top left DM outcome. Just a quick question: can you see my my cursor? Probably not. Right? Yeah. You can? Okay. Can you see it reasonably well? So like if I point at things, it's...
Yeah.
Okay.
Side.
Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of the bad outcome, right? Okay. And now these kind of other parts of the game, they become relevant. So again, like normally by default, we expect that only this top left 2x2 quadrant would be played. Okay, but now the idea is the following. The two original players give the following instruction. So first they tell them to not play DM and RM. They both tell this to their representative, and all of this like conditional on the other one giving the analogous instruction. So they tell them to only play DL and RL, which weren't originally relevant to how the game is played. Now these DL and RL, they can be seen as kind of harmless versions of DM and RM. So in particular, DL is kind of like DM, it's kind of like demanding the thing, but then in case of DL, kind of there's no conflict, there's just kind of nothing happens or something like that. And the idea is that the original players tell the representatives to value this DL outcome in the same way as they would value the DM outcome. So -5, -5. So these blue numbers are the utilities that the original players tell the representatives they should assign to outcomes in the game. Okay, so this is now -5, -5. And these are, they're kept as in the original game, which happens to be the same as this part of the game. Okay, now why might one do this? So by default, so the left is now the game that effectively would have been played by default, and the right is the game that is now going to be played, with the blue utilities being the utilities that the representatives are supposed to assign to the outcomes, and the black utilities are still the ones that the original players, the humans, assign to the outcomes. And now the point is that the blue utilities game on the right-hand side is isomorphic to this original game that would have been played by default. So we might imagine that, like, plausibly, this right-hand game is going to be played kind of in an analogous way to the left-hand game. So this game is going to be played in the same way as kind of the game would have been played if it wasn't for this possibility of making commitments. And the important difference between the two games is that one of the outcomes is better for both players than in the original game. So if DM had been played in the original game, then in this new way of playing the game, we would expect DL to be played, which of course, like, to the representatives, so kind of like they don't, to them that's the same, but to the principals, to the original players, this 1-1 outcome is much better than the -5, -5 outcome. So in the case that this conflict outcome occurs in the original game, it is better for the representative, for both of them, if this new game is played where this harmless outcome occurs. Okay, and the remaining outcomes, like if we expect that, like if in the original game DM RM had been played, then we might expect DL RL to be played in the new game, and that has the same utility for both players, and that's the case for the other ones as well. And that is basically an example of a safe Pareto improvement, which is a which is kind of like an instruction to the representatives to play a game in a new way, such that it's kind of guaranteed to be Pareto better for the original players, even in the face of equilibrium selection and so on. So the important thing is that the original players, to improve on the default, the original players don't have to resolve in any way the equilibrium selection problem in this in this original game. Okay, I'm now going to move to a second example. Maybe people have questions before I give the second example.
I still don't get why the players would do that, because they now want. I mean, those actions are dominated, right? So why would they give these instructions to dominated actions or dominated strategies?
Mm-hmm. So they only, that's a good question. They only do this kind of conditional on the other player giving like the analogous instructions. So like one player wouldn't ever unilaterally say, don't play DM RM, play DL RL. That would definitely be bad. I guess one kind of very simple case where you would tell your representative to play a dominated action conditional on other people making analogous commitments would be the prisoner's dilemma, right? In the prisoner's dilemma, cooperate is strictly dominated, but if you tell your representative to or if you kind of make a commitment to like play cooperate if the other player makes an analogous commitment, that's reasonable, right? And in some sense, what's going on here, at least with respect to the to this kind of commitment to only play these dominated actions, in some sense, that is analogous to this commitment in the prisoner's dilemma. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll continue then. Okay. So here's a second example, which is which is actually older than the first example. And yeah, people sometimes call this a surrogate goal, like the example that I'm now going to give, or a threaten and neutral surrogate goal. And I view it as kind of a special case of a unilateral safe Pareto improvement, where unilateral just means that only one player has to make commitments. Okay. Okay, so here we have a blackmail game. So we have two agents. The right agent has this item, the star, and the left agent wants the star. And the only thing that the left agent can do is that she has this kind of lightning thing, which represents something bad that she can do for player 2. So she can hurt player 2 in some way. And so if she wants to get the item, the natural thing for her to try is to blackmail player 2 into handing over the item. So she could say, I'm going to blackmail you. If you don't give me the star, I'll do this lightning thing against you. Okay. And of course, this has to be credible. If she just like says this, then it's just cheap talk, right? So somehow this has to be a credible commitment, or at least there has to be some kind of credibility. And then also we assume that this lightning, like using this lightning against player 2 is not something that she intrinsically wants to do. It's something that she otherwise wouldn't want to do. Okay. And now, if player 1 decides to make this threat, player 2 can decide whether to hand over the star, in which case, well, he's unhappy because he lost the star, but I mean, at least no threat was carried out. And player 2 may also decide to not give in to this blackmail attempt, and then kind of everyone is unhappy because player 1 doesn't get the items and she has to execute the threat, which she doesn't want to do. And player 2, kept the item, but the threat was carried out, which was like, has to be like, I mean, for the threat to make sense, it has to be worse than losing the item. So this is kind of like, again, this kind of utility being burned outcome as a result of two people making conflicting demands for the star. So here, like, player 1 wants this, kind of insists on getting the star. Player 2 also insists on getting the star, and the result is that utility is being burned. Okay, and here this is given as a normal form game. So this game it's a bit weird because giving in conditional on being threatened is weakly dominates in this game the strategy of not giving in. So one has to tell some kind of story for why player 2 would ever not give in to threats or to blackmail in this scenario. I mean, there are lots of stories that one can imagine here, like reputation, or maybe player 2 can kind of commit beforehand, and there's some chance that player 1 will see whether player 2 has committed beforehand, or the like. In any case, it seems like kind of just giving in to threats whenever they're made against you is kind of like agents that behave this way probably end up not having all that many resources. Okay, but I'm not going to kind of model this. I'm just going to assume that sometimes this kind of weak equilibrium of in which player 2 doesn't give in, that this sometimes can happen. Okay. Now here's the proposed solution for this. So again, we have this game, but now we imagine that player 2 and only player 2 this time plays this game through a representative. So this time they're all smiley faces, so I guess they're all humans. And what player 2 does is player 2 kind of hands over the star to his representative and kind of says, like, yeah, you have to manage this now. And again, player 2 can give some kind of instructions for what to do. And one might imagine that kind of by default, like if there was like no credible commitment, if credible commitment wasn't possible, then we might imagine that we would have this default of aligned delegation, which is just like player 2 telling his representatives, like, here's how much I like this star. Here's how much I dislike getting hit by lightning. And like do the best that you can given this information for me. Okay, now of course if player 2 can credibly give instructions to his representative, then there's another thing that is very natural for him to do, which is to say, just never give in to threats. And then it kind of becomes like a Stackelberg game where player 2 kind of wins by being the first to choose, and it's kind of the I don't know, in some ways kind of the opposite of the other direction of the or like the other ordering. I mean, just 2 minutes ago I talked about how maybe for player 2 it makes sense to always give in to threats. like similarly, maybe for player one, it makes sense to then always not make threats if player two commits first. But I think again, one can make all of these, or like come up with these kind of different real world stories for why this doesn't work. And it seems like in the real world, just like someone committing first doesn't always resolve these kind of disputes. Okay. Okay, but now, so what if player two doesn't want to just give this like never give in instructions? What if player two wants to do something kind of soft that maybe player one wouldn't mind that much? Okay, so here's the idea. The idea is that player one doesn't only have this threat that she can make against player one. She also has some other thing that she can do that player one doesn't actually care about, but that is equally costly to her as the original threat. So like if the original threat is throwing paint at player one's house, then maybe the new threat could be throwing paint at player one's neighbor's house or something like that. So, I guess it's tough for player two's neighbor's house, which I guess is tough for player two's neighbor, but maybe player two didn't care about. Okay, and now the idea is that player two could tell his representative to not. So there are different versions of this, but one version is like player two tells his representative to not care about the original threat, but care about this new threat that player one doesn't actually care about. And again, we assume that this is credible. And then given that this is made, that this instruction is given, player one can again decide whether to blackmail or not, but player one it now only really makes sense to threaten this new threat target that player one doesn't actually care about. So what might happen? So player one could blackmail, and then it could be that player two's representative decides to give in to the threat because player two's representative actually is told to care about this new kind of threat. So then the star is transferred, and then basically everything is as before. But it could also be that player two's representative decides to resist. Then player two's representative is kind of hit with this new type of lightning, this new threat. And now for player one, this is just as in the original game. For player two, this is also just as, for player two's representative, this is also just like in the original game. But for player two, the original player two, this is now fine because the original player two doesn't actually care about this lightning. Okay, and yeah, we can again, we can look at this in the payoff matrix. We can look at how the game is played by default. Then we can look at how this game is played with this instruction. So the utilities need to kind of be exactly isomorphic to the utilities in the original game. And then we again get this safe Pareto improvement that if we assume that the games are played isomorphically, it's guaranteed, like this new game is guaranteed to be at least as good for both players as the original game. And there's there's one outcome. Let's see if we can quickly find it. I guess it's this outcome, the outcome where the threat is made and player two doesn't give in, or player two's representative doesn't give in. In that outcome, player two, the original player two, is now much better off than in the original game. Okay, And then, so, I mean, basically, I've just given examples, right? So, yeah, there's this paper which gives kind of defines what a safe Pareto improvement is, and yeah, shows how to like find these in general, and like gives like complexity results and these kind of things. Okay. So now kind of moving a bit towards the like more discussion-y part. In my mind, the biggest obstacle to implementing safe Pareto improvements or surrogate goals is that one has to make one has to make these instructions credible. And there are, in fact, two things that one has to make credible. So the first thing is that, so like in the surrogate goal language, like one has, the player 2 has to make it credible that player 2's representative actually cares about the new kind of threat. So yeah, that has to be like player 1 has to kind of really believe that player 2's representative actually cares about this new threat about as much as player 2's representative cares about about as much as player 2 cares about the original threat. And also, you have to make it credible that you didn't then kind of mess with their representatives' behavior in other ways. So if you so one thing that you might try to do is you tell your representative, okay, you like care about this this surrogate goal, you make this credible, but then also kind of sneakily you kind of tell them like, oh, and by the way, like don't give in as much. And then it's not I mean, maybe that's like a sensible strategy, but then if that's a possibility, then it's not a safe Pareto improvement anymore, because now it is kind of a strategy for, like, for example, in this blackmail game, it is a strategy for player 2 to kind of screw over player 1, to make player 1 worse off than in the game that would have been played by default. And this seems relatively difficult. I think it's a relatively difficult kind of credible commitment, because it's not just about what action you take in the end, but it's also like about the process at which you arrive at these actions, or maybe it's about counterfactuals, like what would have happened in the original game. So like in the end, if we observe that, for example, in the blackmail game, player 1 makes a threat and then player 2's representative doesn't give in, we can't tell whether everything was done reasonably, or whether there was some funny thing going on where player 2 told his representative to never give in. Okay. Okay, I think I want to just very briefly give one of these kind of stories for how this could work in the real world. So I think if and it's like not using cryptography, leaving that to the discussion. So let's say that I get fired, and there's this kind of typical kind of dispute between my now former employer and me about, I don't know, what my severance package has to look like, and things like that. So I hire a lawyer, my employer hires a lawyer, and now these lawyers kind of argue with each other about what should happen. I don't know anything about law, by the way, so it's like it's very naive view of what happens, probably, but that's kind of how I imagine this happen. You even have these lawyers, and they have these debates, and now let's say that my employer could use various kinds of threats to get my lawyer to accept a lower severance package. So, for example, my employer could say, well, if you don't settle for this low severance package, we're going to put on our website a page that says that Caspar is very unreasonable or something like that. And they have no interest in doing this. The only reason why they might do this is to force me into accepting a lower, or force my lawyer, or get my lawyer to accept a lower severance package. And if that in the end actually happens, then kind of there would be like burning utility again. And now one thing that I might try to do is put in my contract with my lawyer incentives for my lawyer for, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this is not exactly how it works in the real world, but in principle, I could, the way I could set up the contract with my lawyer is that I say, you get paid in proportion to how valuable the outcome of this negotiation is for me. And now if I make this contract public, or if I show it to the university, if I make it transparent to the university what my lawyer's incentives are, then I could use a surrogate goal for my lawyer. So for example, I could say that, like, I could put in the contract that my lawyer gets a low pay, not if the university puts, or my former employer, which I guess in my case, my employer is the university. If the employer puts up a page that says that I'm unreasonable, if instead I could tell my tell my lawyer that I'm not going to pay her pay her as much if the university puts up some random page that just, I don't know, contains like some random ones and zeros, because then essentially the university could use that threat that is completely unimportant to me in the negotiation with my lawyer. Okay, so that's one story. I think to keep it short, I'll skip the other ones. Yeah, thanks for listening, and I hope we have some interesting discussion and brainstorming.
Great. I think I will open the camera here on this computer for you to maybe see the audience better.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, and you can indeed see the audience, right? Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Okay. Yeah, I want to start off with a question. So you mentioned we need to make sure that there are no further secret contracts. And so is it possible or have you thought about does there exist some ways for us to make an agent to commit to lose the ability of further commitment? So if the agent is able to make such a commitment, then it cannot enter a further secret contract.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I would imagine that this is very dependent on the exact application. So, for example, in this lawyer story, well, I mean, I don't really know that much about law, but I would like, I don't know, I would assume that it's possible for a contract to specify that no further payments are going to be made between the parties or something like that. Yeah, I think in the case of AI, it's very tricky because so another, like, I guess the application that I usually think about is we build AI and we install some surrogate goal in it so that if people want to blackmail the AI or like have some conflict with the AI, the surrogate goal is targeted rather than our real goals. And there, yeah, one has to, like, there are all of these different ways in which we can kind of sneakily tell the AI to do some other things. And one has to make it credible that one doesn't do that. one doesn't use any of these ways to tell the AI to like
What are some examples of telling AIs to sneakily,
Yeah. So I think the simplest is just to train the AI a bit differently. Like if you train some ML, like if you use some ML techniques to train your system on like to behave reasonably in bargaining situations or something like that, then you could, if you know that a surrogate goal is going to be used, right, you will want it, you'll want to train the AI in a way that is kind of less likely to give in. And there might be relatively kind of, there might be various ways in which you might be able to train the AI to be less likely to give in. Like you just change the way that the system is trained or something like that in such a way that it is more likely to learn to not give in. And I would imagine that many of these ways are difficult to detect. Like even if the opponent could look at the source code of my training scheme, it might be hard for them to tell whether this training scheme is set up specifically to make it less likely that the resulting model is going to give in.
I see. And in your work, like the assumption was that the person delegating the play to the agent playing the SPI, like trusts the agent to, play similar to what the human or like the delegator would have played the game in the isomorphic whatever like case.
Like even like I guess I think the way the paper is written is that the human kind of has no idea how to play the game. Like the human sees this equilibrium selection, like the original player, the human in the slides, sees this equilibrium selection problem and says like, okay, I have no idea what is supposed to be done here, and then just says, okay, I'll just want to do whatever this system decides is best for me. Or like this representative who might be an AI, might be an experienced negotiator or something like that.
I see. Makes sense. Thanks.
I have a question. Does this so if you're imagining hi Caspar. If you're imagining, I'm just kind of off camera, but I am here. If you're imagining a situation in which you have like pretty sophisticated AI systems that are kind of acting on behalf of humans to do maybe tasks that we can't do ourselves, then that situation sort of makes sense. But I wonder in that case whether like any sufficiently capable AI system that can like do that will also be like able to just infer the true preferences of the agent, of the human or person that we care about, the principal who is delegating to the agent, and in which case they can in fact just maybe threaten that human. I suppose in that case, if it's the AI system is like the only person like taking actions, then maybe that doesn't buy you anything. But I wonder like, is this a concern, or does this just get kind of washed away by the fact that like the human's totally in some sense like out of the picture after the agent is kind of delegated to?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. So I mean, one thing is that normally the idea is that everyone knows what's going on, or at least potentially everyone knows exactly what's going on. So like if I tell my lawyer to disvalue, like if I say, okay, lawyer, I'm not going to pay you all that much if the university, after firing me, puts up a page that says 00111101, then everyone will know that what I'm doing. There's no one will think maybe Caspar actually cares about this page. Everyone, like my lawyer will know, the university will know, everyone will know that what I'm doing is deploying a surrogate goal, but they just kind of don't really care, right? Like the lawyer will want to maximize their payment, so they're going to act on whatever payments I set for them. So they're going to try to avoid this from happening. And the university just sees this, think, okay, I guess now we, instead of threatening to put up a page about how Caspar is unreasonable, we're going to threaten to put up this other page. Well, to us, it's like this also is kind of the same as playing the original game. So we don't really care. And that's kind of the idea. So like even if even if everyone knows what my original preferences are, there's still, like, the idea is that they still go along with this because well, the representative goes along with this because that's what they're told to do, like my representative, and the other side goes along with it because it doesn't hurt them. They have no reason to say like, actually we're going to punish you for using this scheme, because for them, they're going to be equally well off as in the original game.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry. Some of the stories in my head were about kind of things where the principal's preferences might have been kind of hidden or kind of, whatever. But I guess that's not actually necessarily what needs to be going on here. It seems fine if it's not that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think, since anybody has other questions, otherwise I think we can also wait it.
Yeah, okay. I have one. Did you hear the end of this end of the discussion at last, of the last talk?
I heard a bit of it. I think I'm not sure I heard the part that you're going to reference now. If it was the discussion between
Yeah. Okay, so there's this distinction between like delegating to a representative and just like telling them exactly what to do, like specifying a strategy for them, which is like a particular form of commitment, which is sometimes useful. Like essentially equivalent to something or to behave in a particular way, or to just like, as in your paper, delegate to a representative and change their incentives, like by changing their utility function. And yeah, we heard some reasons in the last talk why the former is there's also this idea of like committing yourself to transfer utility, which the previous talk was kind of advocating for, and like saying that it works in their setting, like kind of, it's basically like as powerful as anything else you would want to do, and it's like kind of like good for other reasons, like it's more credible, and more like realistic or something. Sorry, I forgot some of the reasons, but they were good reasons. And I just, do you have a perspective on this? Like, do you kind of agree with the idea that just committing yourself to transfer utility would be like as powerful as, for instance, like what you want to do with, say, Pareto-improve?
I mean, I guess, okay. I mean, I guess in a sense you can.
Like, I guess one claim, like, if you look at the first example you showed, you can't, like, just by committing to transfer utility, you can't like transform the upper left of the quadrant into the lower right. you can do it in different, like if you have the ability to burn utility, then you can like kind of reverse, like there's like this, the four like quadrants of the game are kind of like prisoner's dilemma, and you can like reverse that prisoner's dilemma maybe if you like commit to burn utility. But
yeah, so that's this thing, right? So I guess you can, are you saying like you could use burning utility to commit against DM and RM basically?
So I guess the point of this is that like if you pursue this strategy, like you also have to burn 6 utility in DL RL to make it isomorphic, and then there's no point because now you're just playing the original game.
Yeah.
You can delegate to somebody who, like, where your representative like imagine that they're burning utility, but really not. Then it is again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the answer does kind of depend on whether these kind of schemes count. Yeah, I mean, like depending on what things you allow, it might enable to basically do exactly the safe Pareto improvements idea, which is, yeah, as you say, to transform this game into the top, the bottom right game. But yeah, I mean, I guess normally I wouldn't think of these ideas as kind of being allowed when you say like, yeah, you can commit to transfers. And yeah, I would think that normally, like if you can just commit to transfers, I mean, there are problems that safe Pareto improvements can help with that. Yeah, committing to transfers doesn't help with. But I mean, that's like, I mean, all of this is partly because safe Pareto improvements takes this like somewhat unusual perspective of, yeah, assuming that there are these equilibrium selection problems and assuming that you don't just want to resolve them, right? Like if you just analyze this as like a normal game, like if you analyze this top left in the normal way of saying, well, there's these equilibria, right? Then in some sense, there's not really a problem even in this game, right? You could just, well, like for example, like DMRM it's like a perfectly fine outcome, right? It's Pareto optimal, and so on. Yeah, I would imagine that's like the normal way of thinking about committing to these transfers doesn't always resolve equilibrium selection or like enables dealing with it in the ways that safe Pareto improvements can deal with. Of course, there are lots of other cases where it can resolve the problem in a way that's maybe better than safe Pareto improvements. Yeah, but I haven't thought about this that much.
Okay, yeah, and I think it's time for next session. But before that, we're gonna have let's say 15-20 minute break. Your session can eat into the the end of the brainstorming session. So that's good. And Caspar, thanks for delivering the talk. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, look forward to talk to you more.